right, so welcome to 100 Days and 100 Authors with Adriana. And for the next 100 days, I will be interviewing 100 authors. And it is individuals that I have read their books, and I've also really admired their work. And I want to share their work with the world and give them a spotlight. So today I'm really excited because I get to share Amervis Lopez-Cobb with you. She wrote this phenomenal book called From the Streets to Corporate America, The Power of Mindset and Method, Corner to the Cubicle. And this book really impacted my life. I want to go over a little bit before I introduce Amervis on how I actually met her. I was doing a conference, and after the conference, I was speaking at a conference, and after the conference, we connected and then got to know her, went out a couple of times, and then of course bought her amazing book. And after reading her story, I was really impacted with the fact that really up until that point, I had been complaining about certain things that weren't going right in my life. But after reading this phenomenal book, I realized that I really needed to step back and realize that we all have our stories that we say. And when we meet people like Amervis, we realize just how grateful we can all be. So without further ado, this is Amervis Lopez. And thanks for joining me today, Amervis.
Thank you, Adriana. I'm so excited to be here with you today. You know, I missed you. So even if we're on screen, I'll take that. I'm grateful for that.
Yes, absolutely. Especially now because we're actually doing this interview during the COVID-19. Mm-hmm. So we're all housed in and just hanging out on Zoom, live recording. So
yeah.
So yeah, I can you share with the viewers a little bit about why you wrote the book, and then we'll go on to further questions after.
Okay, absolutely, yeah. I wrote the book because I really felt like we all have a story to tell, and it was my time to share my journey of what I had gone through growing up in North Philadelphia as a youth, and all the difficulties that I experienced as a child, how I navigated through that, and how at the end of the day, once I set my intention towards a more fruitful future, a more positive life, the universe conspired to help me reach my goals. And so I really felt like it was a story worth telling because I kept seeing the signs. And the last sign that I saw right before I full-fledged went into it was a quote that I read from Viola Davis. Now, Viola Davis was in The Help, and she was in a lot of other big productions. She was in, she's the lead in How to Get Away with Murder. And simple words, she said, own your story and share it. And when I saw that quote, I really felt like it had aligned with a lot of the things that I had been exposed to. Brene Brown's philosophy of, you know, being your authentic self and rising above, and people being appreciative of that because your story could be somebody else's survival guide.
Yeah.
Like sharing my story and what I went through at an early age could help somebody else at some point along their journey to see the world in a different way, just the way that I had.
Absolutely. I realized when I read your book, I was like, oh my God, she's so brave that she would share like all the details and all. Like, really, there was so much trauma, and it was such a hard upbringing. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like amazing. And it gives me goosebumps right now just talking about it, because I'm thinking, you know, out of all of the books that I've published thus far, I haven't owned my story. I haven't written about how I grew up, how, you know, all these amazing things that, you know, bad, good, and the ugly, right? And they could really help people, and I haven't done that. And so you inspire me to help me write my next book and to share at the level that you shared, because that was one of the reasons why I kept reading. Because usually, I mean, I have a lot of books. If you saw my a lot of bbooks. So I'll read through 80% or scan through, and but this one was like gripping. I was like, whoa! Like I just, most of it was just it was so raw, and I thought, wow, this is. And then knowing you personally, saying, wow, there's this really amazing woman. Now I know where you get all your strength. And you have like a really amazing character, and you're really persistent, and just you've done so many amazing things in your life, and you would never think that you had this kind of upbringing. And so my question, and I think it's important for the listeners to also know, is how did you do it? Like, how did you go from growing up in this really, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but you got to read the book, but how did you grow up in this like really crazy environment to achieve all of the, amazing things, going into the corporate world, and then moving up the corporate ladder, and then, getting your master's degree, and then, moving up to the C-suites. How did that take place? What was it?
I think that as I look back on that one thing that really set me on that roadmap, and it wasn't a roadmap that went straight, to a certain destination. It was 2 steps forward, 3 steps backward, 5 steps forward, 2 more steps backwards. It was really that understanding of being self-aware. Looking at my situation when I was 17 years old, like I wrote about in the book, and being on that street corner and realizing that there was a difference between me, the person who was doing what I was doing, who should have been doing that, and the observer, and being aware of the fact that if I wanted to have a different outcome, that I had to become more of the observer and not the participant. And at the time, I didn't, or not strictly the participant. At the time, I had no idea about this terminology, or I was being self-aware, or I was being an observer or not an observer. But as I think back on how I started my journey towards something better, because I think at the end of the day, every human being wakes up at some point in their life and says, I want something better, no matter what it is, what context. And so realizing that was something that I had to constantly tap into throughout my career, because once I got the job in corporate America, which is where my first book, because it's gonna be a trilogy. There's more brewing inside, and maybe after that, I had to keep doing that same thing whenever I would run up against a roadblock or an obstacle or a challenge. Was step back, be the observer, and be self-aware. What am I doing to contribute to this situation that's my control? And then what can I do to change whatever it is I don't like, and I don't want to be in alignment with? How can I change that?
Right. I think that it's even deeper, because although like when you were that young, you didn't have the terminology, the lingo, the jargon for, all the stuff that we know now, right? Because I think both of us read similar topics. That you still, something inside of you was brewing. And as I was reading your book, I realized she knew, man, when she was a teen, she knew that she was going to, not that you were better than people around you, but that you had it in you to seek something better. And what I find fascinating is in the book, you have this one friend, Will, who I met at your book launch. And the whole time, like, while I was at the book launch, you said, Will's going to be there. I'm like, I really wanted to meet her because I felt like I really got to know her through the book. And I realized that this whole time that you were going through all this stuff, in high school and as a young child when your grandmother died, and that after, when you were in the middle of all this trauma, but you had this one friend, Will, this one person that you really gravitated towards, and you guys helped each other, and she was almost like a guardian angel for you, and you were both helping each other in a big way, but I think even more so, she was really your rock for a long time, I think. And to me, that shows that just one person like Will, that one individual, helped you come out of really dark stuff. And so some people think, I don't have a network, or I don't have a lot of friends or whatnot. And I think your book is a really wonderful illustration that just that one connection, that one person. And for you, it was Will, right? So when I met her, I was like, oh my God. It was funny because she was kind of like taken aback, because people were like, they knew her because of your work, right? So
Right.
I thought that was kind of neat. And I'm wondering, what did she say about the book launch and what people said?
It was interesting because a few people had gone over to her. They felt like you felt. They wanted to know who this character was that they read about. And she said they asked me for my autograph too next to yours, and I thought that was strange. I had nothing to do with this, and I had to tell her that.
Well, they were asking her for the photo, the autograph.
Her autograph too, and so she was completely taken aback by that. And I had to clarify for her, how can you say you had nothing to do with this? I mean, if it wasn't for Will, who knows what I could have been? Because Will was that one person who, as a teenager, saw me. She saw through the facade and the character that I tried to portray to survive where I was. She knew we saw through each other, and we knew. And when I could have been homeless, she was like, look, just come stay on my couch.
Yeah.
That's the couch, 1988. It's pretty hot outside, and or it gets cold in the winter in 1988 in Philadelphia, and it's either too sticky or too cold. But I was grateful to have her give me shelter in more ways than just her couch. Like, she gave me shelter emotionally, mentally, beyond the physical realm that we live in. And so she's a very humble person, so it was good for me to remind her of she's changed lives in this world, because what she did for me, she's done for a lot of other people where she grew up, and still continues to this day to help other people, and not really do it in any other way other than an unconditional way. She expects nothing in return. And we all need that one person, that one Will.
Yeah.
Like you said, it has to be 20 people. You don't need 20. You just need one. And if you have the luxury of having that one, I think that, our call to action is to be that one for somebody else.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? I've also, throughout my career, as I worked my way up in corporate, been that Will for other people as well, who look like me, talk like me, walk like me, and we're like, hey, how do I navigate through this? And remembering that we always have to pay it forward. I mean, even you was a blessing to me, because we're always going to be on that journey, no matter what heights we get to. There's always going to be peaks and lows in our valley. And so I was excited to be able to be that Will for other people, and to meet you and have you be that Will for me too in my.
Aww. Well, I think in the situation with Will, it would be wonderful if everyone would strive to be a Will for somebody else, like you just said, right? And you don't necessarily have to write books and be published and be trained by the best, or have all these accolades, but it's the simple things. And that's one of the things that I really picked up in your book, is that you really found shelter in this one individual, this one beautiful soul, right? And that was inspiring to me, because I'm thinking, I do a lot of coaching, I do a lot of travel and all of that, and then at the end of the day, am I being a Will to somebody else? That is more interesting to me than all of this other stuff. And I think sometimes it takes a lot of reading, or that's why I'm interviewing authors, because if I pick up a book and if I want to get you on camera, it's because I really believe in your story, and I believe in your message, and I believe that the message needs to spread like wildfire, right? Because once the younger generation can read all of your struggles, they can sit back and say, what's really important,
right?
What's really truly important. And I don't think that people can walk away from reading your book and not being shifted. And I'm not even going to say change, but just there's this spiritual shift that happened for me, because I was like, whoa, it was like almost like I tapped in, and I was like, here I am, complaining about this, complaining about that. And then I look at you, and then you're still hustling and doing your thing, and you're not all bitter and stuff about everything that happened. You're just a go-getter. And so for me, that was a blessing. So I want to thank you for that. And then having the courage to write the story, because it takes courage. And then you and I know a similar author, Vital Germain.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote his book, his first book. And I remember, I think you read it as well, and I read it, and I was like, whoa, it was really raw, very transparent and stuff. And that was my first book of like a biographical book, where I said, wow, one day I'll be able to share, my story and have somebody be impacted like Vital's story impacted me, like your story impacted me, because you guys are writers that really write about the truth, and you're not scared to share it, because at the end of the day, it's like, really, like, share it.
Yeah, I have to say that there are throughout the writing process, and even afterwards, there were moments where I was scared, I was afraid. What will people think? Will they, believe that I was the person that I am the person who I was, not the person who I am? Are they gonna put me in a corner? And nobody puts baby in a corner, So it's just working through that fear, I think, and just saying, as long as I am being real, what bad can really come of that at the end of the day? My heart is in the right place, my intention is in the right place. So just work through it, because you either are making decisions out of fear or love. And so as I worked through it, it was like, I'm doing this from a place of love, not from a place of fear.
Right.
And I don't know, also there were times, even recently, where, I'd have dreams and I'd wake up, and in my dream, I would recall, going, you put it all out there, like, and I'd have to push that out of my mind and go, it's done. I can't go back in the past. It's done. And it was put out there to help someone along their journey.
So what kind of advice would you give somebody who wants to write their own story and wants to publish like you? What would you tell them is the most important thing in order for them to start, and why is it important for them to share?
In order for them to start, I would say that get a tissue box ready. Depending on the nature of your story, because there were a lot of times I found myself on the keyboard and looking down and seeing tears on my keyboard, because it is, people say it's therapeutic, and there's a reason why they say it's therapeutic. It is therapeutic. Be prepared to, like I said, depending on the nature of your story, if it's the type of story that's similar to my story, you're gonna, in order to work through sharing, you're going to have to work through whatever it is you're going through yourself, and healing, going through that healing process, because it is a healing process. And a lot of it I looked at, I said, oh my God, what I wrote, what I was experiencing as a teenager in this cutthroat environment, in the hood of Philadelphia, is exactly or very similar to the scenarios I was experiencing in corporate. And so a lot of me bringing that fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, a lot of that stuff I was bringing into my corporate life. And so while I was able to make strides and move ahead and work out my way up the corporate ladder, it wasn't without scars and wounds, lots of times, scars and wounds that I inflicted upon myself. Going through the writing process and being prepared to heal, number one, that's something that we have to be able to work through. And the second thing that you asked me, it was a two-part question, right? The first part, I really do believe that all of our stories are worth sharing, because we are all more alike than we are different. And as I start to read more books, because I've always been a reader like you, as I start to read more books, I realized, like, I recently read Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. It's been on my list forever. And I finally read it, and I get it. She was at a different time than what I was, but we are more alike than different. And her sharing her story brought to me a lot of that mentality of, that's right. If she was able to document the horrific things that happened to her, and help somebody else process theirs, then that was a positive thing to do for humanity. Like I thought in order to change the world, I had to do something huge. And then I see that just sharing your story, whether it's a blog post or a book or a magazine article or going on a YouTube video, just doing that could be life-changing and changing the world in an incremental, smaller way.
Yeah. Or going to high schools, right? Going to high schools and doing talking to the teachers. I have quite a few teacher friends in high schools, and they allow me to go in and just share. That's really important, because you would be surprised, the young people, they listen.
Yeah.
They're like glued to you, and anything that you say really has an impact. So I think that you probably you hadn't read I Know Why the Cage Bird
Sings.
Yeah, Cage Bird Sings is because maybe you weren't ready for it. I believe that we come across books when we read them when we're ready. And there's a lot of books that I have. I mean, I'm looking at a huge stack right now on my left, and that I know that I'll get to
at some point.
But I love this, and I know you've heard this from Wayne Dyer. He said that even when you buy the book, even if you don't read it, just by having it like in your purse, you're still understanding the material, and you're still getting that energy. Because I think for a lot of us who are writers, I write to understand what it is I know. I write because I know that when other people read my work, they are inspired. And I understand as a writer that, the world belongs to writers. It does really belong to us, because if you think about it, think about all those people that have lived on Earth and we don't know anything about them because they never wrote anything down, and they never published it, they never wrote. I mean, I know that the internet and blogging and stuff is all new, but think about, who do we remember?
Pass down the story, right?
Yeah, we remember those individuals who took up the pen and decided to share and decided to write. And that's how you leave a legacy. That's how you leave a permanent mark in the world, especially now with videos and internet, right? Like, we're gonna do this video, we're gonna post it, and then like 100 years from now, I'm talking to you 100 years from now, right? We're gonna be looking at it saying, wow, we left a little grain of salt, we made an impact, because during the video I was inspired. And I maybe today you published your own very first book, right? So because they're inspired by what Amervis said. And I think that these are all really, really important things to really get down. You don't necessarily have to be like a writer to share your message, I don't think. There's always coaching.
I wasn't a writer when I wrote the book.
But I also know, for you, for those of you who don't know Amervis' background, she trained with Les Brown, and she's got a lot of experience in coaching, and so she has invested in her own professional development. And I think that also comes through in the book, because as I was reading the book, I knew that if you would have written this book maybe 15 years ago, it wouldn't have been the same book.
Yeah, or 15 months ago. I read what I started to write before I published, and I was like, wow, that's not good. This was great, but it's every time you pick up the pen or you start to type and you look back on what you wrote before, it's always better. It's always like, if I revise the book right now and put out a whole new edition, I'm pretty sure that it would probably be better than what I published last August.
Yeah, because you're always growing. Yeah, you're always growing. I agree.
Yeah.
So, okay, so wonderful. Thank you so much, Amervis, for sharing. So let's wrap it up. I want to leave the listeners with your number one tip on what they can do to start writing maybe their own story, and also how maybe they can pick up your book. I know that you're on Amazon. I'll have the links below, but when is your next book coming out, and what your
Okay, so that was last. So let me see.
That was three questions.
What they can do to start writing, what you all can do to start writing your own book if you haven't already, is I look at the book writing process similar to how I look at managing projects. I've been a project manager by trade for over 2 decades. And so when I first had the idea of writing a book, I was overwhelmed by the fact that it was this huge task. It was undertaking, like, I was afraid of how big this task was. And so then I think that the first thing is to look at it like, hey, I'm gonna treat this book like a project, and I'm going to break down the work into manageable components. 52 weeks in a year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
2 weeks in a year. And I think that the average, you could write, let's say, for example, if you wanted to write 50,000 words in a book, give or take, plus or minus 1,000 or 2, you could set a goal of, I'm just going to write 1,000 words per week. And it's 1,000 words per week. And I think the average blog article was about 700 to 1,000 words. You could essentially, in a year, have a book. And don't get caught up in editing. I spent a lot of time rewriting. And when I finally said, just write the chapters or write whatever you're going to write, go back and edit later.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid. You don't have to be a perfectionist. I think being a perfectionist would hold you back. So that's my advice to anybody who wants to write a book. Just start writing and look at it like your pre-write is just your brain dump of what ideas you have. Your drafting is you starting to put it together and formulating a storyline. Then you're going to revise it. Don't spend too much time in analysis paralysis, because I tend to look at things to the nth degree and go crazy in that. And then just proofread it. Proofread it and go on to Fiverr, which is a pretty economical site that Adriana and I both use, and have pay somebody, not as much as you would pay a professional that's out there, to proofread it for you. And it won't take a lot once you start to break it down into manageable components. The second question you asked was, what was the second question you asked?
I don't remember.
What are my plans? You also asked me what my plans.
What's the next 2 books about?
Yes. So the first book, From the Streets to Corporate America, it's actually just laying the foundation. It's if you live on the East Coast and you know the concept of a basement, it's creating the basement in a house. And so with the first book, I created the basement. And the second book is going to be, because the first book ended when I turned 18 and I broke into corporate America. I got my first job in a call center at Prudential Insurance Company of America. The second book will pick up where the first one left off. And I'm debating whether I want to end it when I actually get my first corner office. So from the corner to the cubicle is the first one. The second one would be from the cubicle to the corner office. Some variation of that. And then really the third one is about realizing that success is relative to every one of us. So sometimes success could just be, I want to be a mom. Let's write about being a mom and being happy with that.
I love that. Yes, it's so true.
Or it could be, I want to be a dog owner. I don't know. I'm working through all that, but it's really like breaking down the whole concept of success into the 3 parts. And the first one is really, I was successful because I broke out of that corner into a cubicle. And it may not seem like a lot for some people, but if you look at it metaphorically, it may help see the world in a different way for your own journey and navigating from point A to point B, depending on where you want to be.
Yes. Yeah. I can't wait to read your next 2 books, because it's a trilogy. So, yes. And then when I finish reading this book, I think the next time I saw you, I was like, well, what happened? Because at the end, I never got the whole, like, you left me like in a cliffhanger, because I was like, well, what happened to your mom? And remember? Yeah. I was asking you.
Up with that. You weren't the only one.
The next book, and I'm like, really?
There were quite a few people who were like upset with me, almost like, well, we lived the other stuff. How come you didn't write about the other stuff? And I'm like, those are in other books, but I'm glad to see you excited to see what the next story is going to be.
Yeah, because this book is like, it preps you, but at the end I was like, wait, there's no more. What happened? It's like, I'm like, maybe you missed the chapter, but no, I get it because of the 2 other books that you still want to write. And it's so, you're a really good writer. I'm not saying it because you're my friend, but as I was reading, I was intrigued. And then you use a lot of color and images, and even in the book, like, you have a couple of pictures in here and stuff. And
just share that.
like there's one like corner where you're talking about like you actually.
I think that's the laundromat I worked at when I was 14.
Yeah, like and then you have like pictures of your family and stuff like that, and so I just really appreciated the read. So my hope is that through our conversation today, everybody picks up a copy and everybody can be inspired as I was inspired as we're all going through this COVID-19 scenario. We're home. Let's pick up. Let's read.
You're looking for
I was gonna pick up Amervis's book. Are you going to be doing Audible soon? Or are you going to be doing the audio?
I have to pick that back up again. I want to get started on that again this year. I tried to do the Audible last year for this book, and that didn't quite work out the way that I thought. I severely underestimated the process and how it would work, and the fact that I speak fast naturally, which is something that I need to check and slow down, because when you're doing Audible, you want people to understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm going to revisit that again at some point this year, and then I'm going to pick up book 2 again at some point this year and start to write that. I started to write that last year, and I really felt like I wasn't being spirit-led, so I had to pause, be still, and go, okay, I don't want this to be ego-driven. I want this to be the true story about what happened in a way that is both entertaining and as authentic as it can be. And so my goal is to do that, pick that up and start doing that again.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to put the link below so everybody can go out and buy this amazing, inspiring book. And
From
then,
the streets to corporate America.
Yes, and then all her information is below. So if you want to reach out to her, I'm sure that she's available and open. Because after you read this book, I think you're definitely going to want to connect with her somewhere or another if you're an author or whatnot. So thank you so much, Amervis, for being with me this Saturday during our COVID-19. I appreciate you. I think the world of you, and I can't wait to read your next books.
Thank you. I love you too, hon. All right. Have a good one. Take care.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.